Hello everybody, and welcome to this session number 12, the last session for the course Business Research Methods for Business Administration, and for also students and for other students. This session is going to be about communicating research findings, which is writing the report or the final report, which is the last thing that the students and researchers will do, and it is the most important thing, because you might do a good research, get good findings, but you might not be successful in presenting and disseminating and also showing this research. So we will discuss all these during this session. So after the end, or at the end of the this session, the ILOs or the students should be able to list the objectives of research report and also discuss the research report from the perspective of communicating the process of the communication process, how we can communicate the findings to the people, so researchers can use it, and also the organizations also can get beneficial or benefited from it. The third ILO is the students should be able to, after finishing this session, describe the format of research report and also discuss several techniques for graphically displaying research results. That's what we intended to do and what we are going to explain. Accordingly, or depending on that, the contents of the session is going to be the first thing is communicating the research finding, then we'll talk about the research report, and then the components of the research report, and also the publishing, how to publish your research and disseminate it for a lot of people. And after that, what are the common problems in preparing the research report, which is also very, very important thing to be learned. So we can, by avoiding them, we can come up with a good report. So let's first talk about the value of communicating research findings. Why the communicating of research finding is very important. So if the results of a research project cannot be effectively communicated, the project is not a success. So you will spend much time in preparing research, but at the end you need a good research report, so you can communicate the results of the research, and it can be used by all the people, and theoretically and practically people can use it. So no matter how well they are designed and implemented, so the communication of the findings and the result is very, very important. So talking about the effective research communication, which is just evaluating the communication of the research, which is evaluating the dissemination of the research findings, we might need to talk about two main aspects of communication. First, communication is appropriate dissemination of results, which is how we can disseminate the results and findings appropriately so people can understand it and get the benefit of it. The second aspect of communication is paying attention to the ongoing communication and dialogue through the research effort. So it's getting some ongoing communication, the evaluation of the findings, people will know about it, build their research on these findings. So to have a clear findings, it will let or build a dialogue or construct a dialogue throughout the research effort. So the research report is the instrument or the tool of disseminating, or let's say communicating the findings of the research. So why do we need the research report? Why we write such thing? in research. So the first reason or the first objective of the research report is that to effectively communicate the findings of research project. This is very important. So communicating the findings of research projects so people can know, can read, regardless whether they are researchers, so they can build their research or depending on these findings you have got, or people will use it practically in organizations or in the real life situation. So it provide also the interpretations of those findings in the form of sound and logical recommendations. So it's going to be summarized into recommendations. The reflection of the findings is going to be a recommendation for researchers, as I said, for people, for organizations, for anybody who is related to the findings of this research. Another objective of the research report is to establish the credibility of research project. So the way you are going to communicate the findings, or you are going to write the report, is going to clarify and show the credibility of the research project by introducing justifications, logical ideas, linked and integrated or integrative report is going to make the research project much more credible. Another objective, which is for the report, for the research report, or for writing research report, is to serve as a future reference document. So as a future reference document for the strategic or tactical decisions. So it's going to be a reference for people working in organizations or for researchers, so it can help them in their strategic and tactical decisions. They can go back to it and find what has been written there. Okay, so in general, the report should give a detailed description of the research objectives, which is the first thing that the research is going to introduce. So what is the objective of this research first? Then the research questions. Then the literature review. If you remember, when we talked about the process of research, we talked about these things, starting with the research problem, objective, questions, and the literature review, description of research or the research methodologies, findings displayed in tables or graphs or chart, and the interpretation and summary of the findings, and also the conclusions and recommendations. So all these can be, let's say, the components, or can be the main parts of the research report. There are some other parts or things that can be dealt with in the research report. We will talk about them now also. So the research report or the presentation must establish, as we said earlier, credibility, and the credibility here for the research report is going to be the quality of report, or a report that is related to accuracy and believability and professional organization. So to what extent the report can show accurate findings and accurate and also findings that can be believed and of a good quality. The believability is the quality of a report that is based on clear logical thinking. So the writing or the way you write the research report is going to depend on how to synthesize ideas, how to let's say show logical ideas and clear and logical thinking. So this is what we call the believability in the research. It should be also precise expression, or it should include precise expression. So you write to the point, you be also economical. So whatever is needed, you need to, or whatever is loaded with ideas and logic, you need to write them. Also, the quality of a report that is based on also accurate presentation. This is also one of the criteria in which we can, let's say, evaluate the believability. Now, what are the components, the main components of a research report? This is very important to be discussed, and it's the main components of the research report. This is dependent on what should be detailed in the research report. What is important to be reported to the reader or the researchers or anybody who needs to use or get the benefits of the findings here. So the main components of the report or research report, starting of course with the title, then acknowledgements, abstracts, table of contents, introduction, literature review, conceptual framework, methodologies and procedures, results, discussion and recommendations, and also at the end the limitation. Of course, the references must be also there at the end. So any research report must or should include these components. Some of the research might discard some of these components when like the research papers published in international journals or in journals. They might not, for example, write the table of content, for example. Sometimes the methodologies talking about the methodologies in brief. So some of these components might not be written in some of the types of research. But when we talk about thesis and dissertation, that means all the components must be included. Okay, so when we write the research report or the components, or include the components of the research report, we must note that the similarities to the project proposal, when we prepare the research proposal, we are preparing part of the research report. According to the APA, the research proposal might be the first 3 chapters in brief. So what we are going to do when we write the research report for the first 3 chapters is elaborating the first 3 chapters, okay? And then we finish the report by writing or including the findings, discussion, recommendation, and limitations. So sometimes section of the proposal can be used directly as in the report, and the above section, which is the proposal, apply mostly to graduate thesis and dissertation, not in journal articles, as we have talked a little bit earlier, which tend to be much briefer. So talking about thesis and dissertation, we're talking about a report consisted of at least 100 page or more, 120 pages or more, might be 250 pages. But when we talk about a journal article, that means it shouldn't exceed 30 pages. So when we write the journal articles, we must be much more brief here. Okay, so the first component, as we said, is the title, which is writing the title of the research that can reflect the research problem, that can reflect the research questions, the variables used, the setting, or the population, or the sample of this research must be reflected in this part. So it is the same advice as for writing the proposal title, which is, as I said, short but reflecting the research problem in terms of the research variables and also the population and the setting. The authors, of course, must be put there, the affiliation, keywords, similar information often on the title page. The second component is what we call the acknowledgements. So every researcher must recognize the assistance and support of individual and organizations, especially funding. And also here people must write something or recognize the efforts of the supervisor, for example, or anybody assisted the researcher, for example, in collecting data, in the analysis, or in doing anything in the report. So all these people or organizations must be thanked and must be recognized. Their work must be recognized and acknowledged in the research report. The third component is the abstract, which is the summary, a compact summary of the research report, summarizing everything. The components of this part is objectives, methodology, research objectives, methodology, findings, and also the contribution or the added value must be there, and some recommendations in the compact summary, which is the abstract. So it is sometimes called the executive summary of the research. It's as I said, very, very important part, because most of the people or readers, the first thing they are going to read in your research is the abstract before going and in depth and reading the whole report. So it is the only thing most people will read in deciding to read your paper or not. So anybody wants to read your paper, he's or she is going to read first the abstract and find out whether it is attractive or it is related to the topic or the issue they are looking for or reading in. The components number 4 is the table of contents, and as we said, the table of contents must be written or included in dissertations and thesis also, but not in research papers. So it's listing or outline the organization report, or the organization of the report, how you have organized the things and components of this report. So it shows headings, subheadings, and other divisions. Sometimes includes lists, tables, figures. But this is, as we said, is special for the thesis and dissertation. It must not be there when preparing a research paper or an article to be published in a journal, or even in a conference. So journal papers usually delete this section, as we said. Another component is the introduction or introductions, and the main introduction for the whole work. This is very important, and also introductions for every component or for in the beginning of every chapter. So the style for introduction vary from research to another, from long and detailed to short or even absent, but it is very important because it reflects the background of the research problem. So it must be there, background of the research problem. So because when we state the research problem, we must state it in brief, be concise. So whatever is related to the problem and needs to be explained, it might be included in the background, which is the introduction of the whole research work. The second is the review of literature. We talked about this in previous sessions as a process and as a procedure in the research. But here we will talk about it as a part of the research report. So it serves the same purpose as the research proposal, which is its purpose to show the research gap. It also very important to show that there must be a contribution, and also to avoid repetition. And also it is very good and very important to be written there, because it shows the basement of the measurements and how you have developed the measurements. And then conceptual framework is another component, which is it serves the same purpose in the proposal. So in the proposal and in the main report, you need to include the conceptual framework just as the literature review. So sometimes just directly from the proposal, but usually undergoes some refinement. So it may be eliminated in readers, or if readers are not economists, so we might include it, disclose it. The methods and procedures, which is one of the most important parts in the report. So the researcher needs to write or explain how he has prepared and designed this research. What about the data collection? What about the data analysis? How he has collected the data, how he can manipulate the data, the source, the analyzing methods, and also the models developed, and the techniques used. So whatever is related to answering the question how you have done this research must be reported in this section, which is methodology and procedures. In most of the styles of research, this is going to reflect chapter, a separate chapter, which is sometimes chapter number 3 in any research. But in research papers, it is only part of the research paper, which is going to be briefly designed. So it includes problems encountered and how they were addressed. The results or the findings. This is the output of any research, and we prepare the research report mainly to disseminate and communicate the findings. So this is the main or one of the main parts of the research report. So presenting and explaining the results of the analysis. This is the end product of all the analysis for or from which objectives were either achieved or not. This is very important. So the hypotheses have been tested and the results reported here also. The discussion, which is discussing the results or the findings and show what this research introduced and what this research contributed. What are the contributions? So we need to discuss the results in order to talk about the contributions. We need also in this section to compare between the current findings, the findings of the current research in comparison with the previous researches, and which one is different from each other, and what are the differences, and how these differences can serve or can show research gaps and can be grabbing the attention of new or potential researchers. So this provided the reader with a general understanding of the research projects. It most often includes an overview of the entire study, emphasizing problems, objectives, methods, procedures, results. So mainly here in this section, you need to write about the findings and what are the ideas comes from these findings. The conclusions also represent the researcher interpretation of the results. So the interpretation of the findings is very important to be discussed and compared with the previous studies. The list of references, very important component, and people must do it and must list it here, because all the citations inside the report must be listed in a form of references at the end, so people can depend and rely on the research and trust the research and the resources of this research. So a listing of all references used in every part of the report often varies similar to the research proposal. The appendices, so many parts of the research you might not, or you cannot include inside the report. You might attach it at the end as appendices. So it is the part which can be useful but are not always used. It is also some information for some readers, not all the readers, so they can be used to present the materials that might disrupt the flow of thoughts in the report. So it might be of interest only for some of the readers, not all the readers, like mathematical proofs, derivation, some statistical estimation or test or whatever. The recommendations and limitation, this is also very important part, and it must be, if it's going to be in sequence, it must be after the discussion, discussion of the research. So the recommendation should be put forward to implement the result of the study toward the beneficiary of the study, and the limitation, which is the weaknesses in research methodology that might affect confidence in research conclusions. Not only in this, it is only a minor weakness, it must be minor weakness, so the researcher couldn't finish this or do this because of some constraints, like limitation of research, like sampling bias, for example, like financial constraints, for example, and also time pressure and the measurement error, which we cannot guarantee, especially when it's a questionnaire and to be distributed to the sample or the respondents, and we cannot guarantee 100% the accuracy of it. So that's why in the significance or the confidence test, we can accept an error of 0.5, an error of 0.05 in administrative research. Okay, so all these components can be or must be included in dissertation and thesis, but not in the research paper. So the research paper is going to be a previa piece of work, previa research. So some of the components may not be appearing or may not be included in the research paper. After we prepare the report, we need to publish this report. So communicate this report with the people of interest. So written research reports communicate knowledge within the research scientific community. Publications are primary means of dissemination. So to publish this work in, for example, an international journal, or to publish it in a conference proceeding, or any other type of disseminations. process. Once published, the research results become public knowledge. So everybody can read it, build on it, criticize it, and evaluate it. So, however, the original ideas must always be recognized that it is your ideas, but it's going to be used by everybody in the world. Anybody who is interested in your research in your area is going to use it publicly. In addition to the journal publication, other outlets include technical bulletins, reports, proceeding papers, as I said, symposia, and many symposium or many symposia. It can be also published in work papers, also can be discussed in workshops or whatever. So among the common reasons that proposed, refereed, published, or publication fail to be accepted are inadequate identification of research problem. So the report, the way you are going to prepare the report can affect the acceptance of it in the publication in journals. You might do a good research, but you may fail in reporting it in a good way. So you will face a rejection from publication. The second one is inappropriate and unclear methods and procedures. So these are the main components that you need to make sure that they are going to be reported in a clear way. Inappropriate materials for the proposed publication, failure to communicate what is important and original, poor organization, the organization of the whole work. So the common problems in preparing the research report, the first one is lack of data interpretation, unnecessary use of complex statistics. Sometimes a lot of complex statistics you don't need to use it. Emphasis on packaging instead of quality. So what is very important in these types of report is the quality, how you can introduce the ideas. But packaging everything inside cannot help and can make the research report poor. Lack of relevance, so cohesion and coherence and the linkage between ideas, the writing which can be integrative, can move from an idea to an idea, link this idea with that idea is very, very important. Otherwise, it's going to make a weak report. Placing too much emphasis on a few statistics. So only few statistics, it doesn't carry a lot of findings. You can push it much or place too much emphasis on it. It will make the report very poor. So finally, I hope that the students have learned a lot of things in this session. The first thing is they must have learned how they list the objectives of the research report, also discussing the research report from the perspective of communication process, describing the format of a research report, and also discussing several techniques for graphical displaying research results. An assignment is going to be attached and uploaded in the LMS along with this session, and I hope everything is clear. And what I have tried from the beginning for this session is that the report, research report, is very important, and it is the one that can show the quality of your research process. So students must care about this and pay a lot of attention in preparing a good research report, so he can or she can make the findings clear, disseminate it and communicate it to everybody who is interested in this topic. We come to the end of this session, which is session number 12, the last session for this course, Business Research Methods. We have, of course, discussed communicating research findings, the research report, and we said that it is the most important part of doing research, because it is, if you do a good research, you need to disseminate, and you need also to communicate the findings in a good way so people can use it, regardless whether they are researchers or only organizations. So also we talked about the components of research reports, what must be included in dissertation and thesis, and what must be included in articles and publishing in international journals. Also, we talked about the publishing and dissemination and how you can publish the findings you have got, and also the common problem in preparing the research reports. So I hope everything is clear to you and you have understood everything. That's the end of this course, the session number 12. Thank you for listening, and thank you very much for attending these classes virtually or online, and I hope you get all the information and knowledge needed to prepare research for business administration students. Thank you very much, and thank you.